Today we're looking at Robert Oster Australian Shiraz. Hi, I'm Adam and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now Robert Oster's Australian Shiraz is a magenta ink. But before we get to the writing sample, let's take a look at the sciencey bits. Now I agree with Vita that doing multiple chromatographies over the years that I've done it has taught me a lot about the performance of ink. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and I put it into water immediately for 10 to 15 seconds. We see that it starts as a pink and it works its way up through the magenta and it becomes a much darker magenta at the top. The one on, and it has, if you can bring it in on your video, you'll see a very faint purple line at the very top of it. Nice. Now the one on the left, I let dry for 10 minutes before I put it into the water for that 10 to 15 seconds. We see the same thing. We see this pink up into magenta and a thin purple line right across the top. Very neat to look at. It gives it that very interesting look. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink will perform on paper and, more importantly, how hard is it to clean out of the pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before I test it. Now when I put the highlighter down, it completely reactivated this ink and started to move it all over. It became blurry and hard to read. Water completely reactivated it and was lifting it entirely off the page. It looks like it wasn't even there. The same thing happens for the flush, although there's no reason to have to use pen flush for as much as this ink moves, even after it's dried. But I test it anyway because the spot's there. Now bleach, of course, bleach totally off the page. Don't bleach your pen unless you have to. And even then, that should be way watered down, but you don't need that with this ink. Now this is a bell curve, or a normal distribution. For the 365 inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5. And we're able to look at viscosity like the flow of the ink. Now normal for the viscosities is one standard distribution from the average, which is the range 2.1 to 2.9. Robert Oster Australian has a viscosity of 1.66. That means it's a very wet ink. It's in the red. It's a high flow. Good news if you have a dry pen. Bad news, perhaps, if you have a gusher in a broad nib. This bell curve is for the average dry time. Now for the 365 inks I tested, I have found the average dry time to be 17 seconds. And I found the normal range to be from 13 to 21 seconds. Robert Oster Australian Shiraz has an average dry time of 15 seconds, well within the normal range. So how do I find my average dry time? I average my writing samples done with the extra fine and medium nib on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. So now let's take a look at the writing samples. I got this ink in sample form, and to keep writing samples consistent, as I always do, I'm using a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's look at Clairefontaine. We have no bleed. We are getting a little show through in the heaviest spots, so a little bit of ghosting, but nothing that would stop you from using both sides. With the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. With the extra fine, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. It's a flat out dark magenta. And that's it, at 9 seconds to dry. Medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. All you're getting here is a dark magenta with nothing else going with it. It's a nice color, a little dark for me, but not horrible. Looking at the scrubby, we do not expect to see shading in this writing. We don't see it at all in the scrubby. And on a smear test, I would be able to recover that smear. So if I smeared while I was writing, I would still be able to get what I had. So that's nice. Looking at Tomoe River, we have no bleeding, but we have ghosting because it is Tomoe River. On the 1.1, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. But it does look lighter than it did on the Clairefontaine. The extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 17 seconds for this ink to dry. That's a long time. I don't know if I'm willing to wait that. I'm a patient person, and I don't know if I'm willing to wait 17 seconds for this ink on this paper. With the medium, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 26 seconds. I am definitely not willing to wait 26 seconds for this color on this paper. That's me. Looking at the scrubby, in both cases, we see that we do not expect to get any color variation with this ink. And on the smear test, we definitely do not get to read if you smear while you're writing. Looking at Rhodia, that's a transfer, that's not a bleed, because there's nothing lined up. So that's definitely from the paper underneath, that's not from bleeding through. We have no bleeding here, we have no ghosting. With the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. With the extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. Not a horrible magenta. I like it there. I don't like it with the medium. 10 seconds to dry. I can live with that. Medium nib, much darker as a tone than what we got with the extra fine. So much darker, very rich color right there. Too dark for me, but not horrible. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no color variation at all. 14 seconds. We look at the scrubby for both. We don't expect any shading to occur with this ink, but on the smear test, you could recover this. Looking at TWSBI paper. On TWSBI paper, we have a spot of bleed that's about to happen. Not really through, did not touch the paper underneath. So close, just watch out for your very wet nibs with this paper. It's a little more absorbent paper, which is the reason that's going to happen. The ghosting's not a problem. There is some ghosting, but it's not a problem. Looking at the 1.1, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. But it gives us a nice color. It gives us a nice magenta there. Not like the medium, but it gives us a nice color with the 1.1. Looking at the extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 9 seconds to dry. Moving on to the medium, it's a little darker than what we get. It's a couple steps darker than what we get with the extra fine. Just too dark for me. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We get moments of what looks like shade. And that could be the pen just having sort of a dry moment with an absorbent paper. But we are seeing some color variation that occurs in the lazy, it occurs in the fox, it occurs in it occurs in the jumps. So we could just go ahead and say that yes, this ink is giving us shade on this paper with that pen. This is our first moment of shade at all with this ink. Looking at the scrubby, I don't expect to see the shade looking at the scrubby, so it's very surprising in the medium. On the smear test, we could recover this. Now we move on to Moleskin paper. Moleskin notoriously bleeds. It did touch the page below with these bleed spots. Not horribly, but it did touch it. That much bleed. Ghosting doesn't matter because you don't get to write on the other side. This is a medium nib at the top. We get feathering. I didn't really get spread on this, but I do get feathering, quite a bit of feathering. Looking at the extra fine nib, we do have feathering. We have no spread. So this ink performed very well with Moleskin paper. When I look at that, it performed very well. It didn't spread in either the medium or the extra fine. We do have feathering. I don't know that that's the end of the world if this is a notebook in your pocket and you just have to jot something down. No spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. We see no shade's going to occur when we look at the scrubby. And when we look at the smear test, I don't know that you definitely can recover this. You probably could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. So that's what I have for the writing sample. Instead of finding an ink that looks like Robert Oster's Australian Shiraz, I would prefer to find an ink that will complement that magenta color on the page. I thought a nice light violet might be in order, which made me think of Noodler's Tchackovsky. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I'm asking if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I ink it up in a different pen for a day. I then ink it into a different pen. Today it was the Cross Baily with a medium nib to take my notes for this video. So what do I think of Robert Oster's Australian Shiraz? I think it's too dark a magenta for me. It is not bad, it is too dark of a magenta for me. That being said, it performs very well on moleskin paper. So now, the big question, would I buy a bottle of this ink? I would not, because it is too dark of a magenta. I enjoy magenta inks. I tend to use them more than reds, but this one is a little too dark. And I find if I have a dark brown with it, or if I have a lighter black, I know that sounds weird, that it can get a little lost. A dark purple, it can get lost. So I don't tend to prefer it for that reason. Thanks for watching.